the 3rd of July, the Ukrainian Armed Forces Special Operation continues.
Fuck right in the mouth. Now that's a message. I truly love this.
A powerful strike was delivered on an ammunition depot. Massive detonation. Defense forces are attacking the occupied territories. There is also information that the GUR may have eliminated the Vice Admiral of the Black Sea Fleet. Things are really heating up, as they say. First of all, the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces confirmed the strike on the command post of the occupiers' 8th Combined Arms Army. A corner was eliminated. This is a serious blow. Gerasimov is probably shaking over there, getting ready for his own defeat. Moreover, Putin is about to lose. A strike by the Ukrainian Armed Forces on the center of Donetsk. The commander of Russia's 8th Combined Arms Army, Goryachkin, has been eliminated. These are serious losses. Moreover, today a powerful explosion occurred at one of the oil wells near Grozny. Chechen opposition channels reported this morning. After the explosion at the well, a large fire broke out. An important facility in Russia's Saratov region was hit. There was an attack on a military airfield, and moreover, the territory was attacked of the Saratov-Zintez oil refinery in the Saratov region. Drones also successfully attacked the Kupol plant in Izevsk, which produces Tor air defense systems, drones, and anti-aircraft missile systems. Let's discuss all this with the well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Grigorievich, welcome.
Thank you. I wish everyone good health.
Roman Grigorievich, how serious is it for Gerasimov, Putin, and the general staff in general that we attacked the command post of the 8th Combined Arms Army and eliminated the commander of this Russian army, Goryachkin?
They set up in Donetsk itself, which is about 50 kilometers from the front line, roughly 55 kilometers to Pokrovsk. That's the so-called army depth, and that's about how it is maintained. Naturally, the army headquarters was deployed there, and it was quite seriously fortified. There are at least several floors there, but most likely one of our bunker-busting missiles was used, either a Scalp or a Storm Shadow, because it penetrated several floors and took out the Russian headquarters, eliminated it. Well, to be fair, he was only the acting commander of the 8th Army, but still, in other words, a colonel is already a general level position. He was preparing to become a general, but most likely he'll be awarded the rank posthumously. This is, of course, a major, a significant loss for the Russians ahead of, or rather, during the ongoing summer offensive, because it is precisely the 8th Combined Arms Army that is now directing the offensive operations on the main sector near Pokrovsk, from Golyapol to Pokrovsk to Konstantinovka. That is exactly their area of operations. And this, I'll tell you, is a very serious blow to the Russians. Plus, of course, for our strike assets that carried out this attack and our intelligence, which identified the target, that is guided and completed the task of targeting and essentially eliminated an entire army commander. So this is serious. It's a significant problem. And not just the army commander, the entire headquarters was taken out. So you could say that, well, for at least a couple of weeks, the Russians will lose some of their momentum. That's why your command, especially the rear command at the army level, is so important.
Roman Grigorievich, regarding Grozny, it's been a long time since I've read news like this. So a powerful explosion occurred at one of the oil wells near Grozny. This is the work of Ukrainian drones, the work of our concerned people, as you say, on the territory of the Russian Federation. What do you think?
This is not the work of our concerned people. I mean, they are concerned people, but not ours at the moment. But nevertheless, these concerned people who are not ours are still accomplishing our objective. The thing is, right now in the Caucasus, there are significant developments related to internal resistance. Recently, by the way, we talked about this, and in Ingushetia, a National Guard university or institute of some sort was blown up. So again, these are concerned people, but what objective are they pursuing? Essentially, they're pursuing their own objective. That is, they're fighting for their independence, Dagestanis, Ingush, and also Ichkerians. Chechnya, Ishkeria, is an independent republic that was once led by the pilot Dudayev. If anyone remembers, so right now, at this moment, these internal forces are definitely rising, and the fact that they're carrying out certain tasks let me repeat, they are pursuing their own objectives. Why, for example, is Russia's hydrocarbon industry being destroyed? How long have we been talking about hydrocarbons with you? In order for the Ingush, the Ichkerians, and even the Dagestanis to be able to leave the Russian Federation, It has to be broken up like the Soviet Union was. So how can it be broken up? Only by economic means. The main economic foundation of the Russian Empire is oil, hydrocarbons, the oil and gas sector. You can call it whatever you like. And the destruction of this very sector would at least give us hope for the collapse of the Russian Federation through economic mechanisms, the same ones that brought down the Soviet Union. And this is exactly what the forces of resistance are working on. We call them the concerned ones. Well, it's clear why they're called the concerned ones, right? They're doing their job, but they're also helping us because we want the same outcome. Without the collapse of the Russian Empire, we won't be able to liberate Donbass. We might be able to liberate Crimea. We might be able to cut off the land corridor because the positioning of the Russian troops there is very inconvenient. Crimea is practically geographically isolated operational pocket surrounded by seas. The land corridor is very narrow, only about 80 kilometers wide. It's impossible to hold it when it's 300 or 400 kilometers long and pressed up against the sea. But Donbass, well, behind Donbass, there are 7,000 kilometers of Russia. But it will be very difficult to take Donbass back from the Russians, especially since it would need to be surrounded, that is, cut off from Russia along the Siversky Donetsk, along the Don River, all the way to Rostov, to Taganrog, or maybe even further, depending on what's possible. And that's practically impossible as long as all of Russia is behind it. I'll say it again, it's a very deep rear area. That's why for us, in order to liberate Donbass, it's crucial to break up the Russian Federation, and that is possible. The Soviet Union collapsed for exactly the same reasons. And it was a much more powerful empire. Russia is just a fragment of the Soviet Union, and it will basically fall apart in much the same way. And a big thank you to the people of Ichkeria who are understanding all these processes, are fulfilling their mission. The same goes for the Ingush and the Dagestanis. Moreover, now a serious confrontation has begun between Azerbaijan and Russia. And this confrontation could very well lead, among other things, to the liberation of these republics, Ichkeria, Ingushetia, Dagestan, and their exit from the Russian Federation. The Russians obviously are now trying to retaliate for Nagorno-Karabakh for the restoration of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. Nagorno-Karabakh has been returned, Azerbaijan has taken it back. Nagorno-Karabakh is the territory of Azerbaijan, no one has ever doubted that. The Russians returned it there, created a so-called bada boom about 30 years ago between the Armenians and Azerbaijanis. Now this issue has been resolved. That is, they defined a new border, settled on it, and took back their territory. Pashinyan has already, well, at the very least in Turkey, they have already made contact with Erdogan. By and large, the issues in this region have been resolved, and naturally this makes the Russians uneasy. They are trying once again to destabilize this region, to spark some so-called Caucasian wars again. We definitely need to move away from this, or rather not get involved in them at all, of course. I believe that the Azerbaijani, Armenian, and Turkish peoples will be able to sort out this situation themselves. And meanwhile, if I may put it this way, as the Russian Federation collapses, Ichkeria, Ingushetia, and Dagestan will finally gain their independence.
Dear audience, please like this video. Roman Grigorievich and I go live 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Every week, please write a few kind words in support of Ukraine in the comments on my YouTube channel. Roman Grigorievich. There were explosions in the Saratov region. The Engels Air Base is located there, also known as Engels 2, which houses Russia's strategic nuclear aviation Tu-160 and Tuesday 95 milliseconds bombers capable of carrying nuclear warheads. Was the military air base itself attacked, Roman Grigorievich?
Well, based on the information currently available, the attack did target the air base as well, but so far there is no confirmation of any damage to aircraft or airfield technical equipment. There is confirmation only regarding Saratov itself, specifically some factories.
As for the Saratov region, as I understand it, we attacked Saratov Orgzintes in the Saratov region of Russia. This is an oil refinery. We always say that it's necessary to strike oil refineries. And it seems our broadcasts are being listened to. Roman Grigorievich, are you satisfied today, which is very important?
I'm doubly dissatisfied. Why? Because Saratov Orgzintes has nothing to do with oil refining. Absolutely. The Saratov oil refinery produces diesel, oils, and gasoline. So these are 2 completely different plants. The Saratov oil refinery and Saratov Orgzintes Saratov Synthesis is a chemical plant, meaning it's a chemical enterprise that produces certain types of chemical products which are mainly exported abroad. Basically, they export everything abroad. So essentially, this plant has nothing to do with military affairs. Although to fulfill the goal of collapsing the Russian economy, of course, it also had to be included. It's just that the way our general staff and the main circuit directorate present information, to put it mildly, is more like, as they say in Ukraine, zamilivania ocha, right? Pulling the wool over your eyes. Yeah, it's just eyewash. They were pulling the wool over our eyes, pushing the idea through the general staff that so Svitun wouldn't talk too much about the oil refinery. Let's just say that Saratov Synthesis is an oil refinery. Svitun knows very well what an oil refinery is and what a chemical plant is, especially when it comes to the Saratov direction. Besides the airfield, there's also Saratov 63. That's a nuclear weapons storage facility nearby, south of Engels, meaning south of the airfield itself. There's also a rather large underground aviation fuel storage. There are caissons, tens of thousands of tons of aviation kerosene. We need to reach those as well. So in this sense, Svitun will sort things out and won't let anyone pull the wool over our listeners' eyes. A big hello to the guru and the general staff.
Roman Grigorievich, regarding the Kirskaya Airfield in occupied Crimea, the first video confirmations have already come in. Indeed, we attacked both the helicopters and the runway. Roman Grigorievich, right now we need to continue active strikes on military airfields first and foremost. There is tactical aviation, strategic aviation there. The floor is yours.
If the task is to liberate Crimea, if that's the objective, though we don't know for sure, it's not insider information. But as analysts, observing certain actions of our special services, our army, we can analyze what they are being done for. So over the past 1.5 to 2 weeks, there has been a systematic destruction of the enemy's air defense along the entire coastline. And not just the coastline, but across the entire territory of Crimea, because there were strikes on Saki, and well, that's Novofedorivka, on Kacha as well, on Jankoy, and on the capes where air defense systems are stationed. Several S-300 and S-400 systems, as well as radars, have been destroyed. There was a strike, and in fact, the most recent one to the northeast near Kerch was quite successful. They took out several radars, 2 Kasta systems and 2 others. So really well done, excellent work. At the airfield in Kirovsky, they also took out Mi-8S, Mi-28S, Mi-26 helicopters, plus a Pantsir system. The strike was near Kerch on a civilian it's an old civilian airfield that the Russians are now using as a launch site for their Geran drones. There were also radars stationed there, which were damaged as well. So preparations are underway. If things are proceeding in this way, then we can say that preparations are being made to achieve air superiority so that heavier and more powerful assets can strike at military targets in Crimea and destroy them. The window of opportunity is about a week to a week and a half. So they've taken out about a dozen radars there. While the Russians are coming to their senses, while they deploy a new system or switch over, there is a certain window of opportunity, for example, to strike the Kerch Bridge or to hit several airfields. There are still about 5 left that the Russians have there, so at least to finish them off. Several underground military facilities in Crimea can also be targeted while the Russians are still busy restoring their air defense system. If a serious strike is not delivered within this week to week and a half, the window of opportunity will close and they will redeploy their air defense systems again. A week and a half is enough for that, in other words. About 10 days out of a month. And after that, if the task of destroying the Kerch Bridge arises again, we'll have to start everything from scratch. We'll have to strike the Russian radars again, meaning the Russian ones, and repeat the whole process all over. So we'll see within the next week, it will become clear. If we continue the attacks, it means this is the beginning of the liberation of Crimea. In fact, we can mark the 1st of July, 2025 as this date. We can say that from this moment, the liberation of Crimea began, again, if this kind of work continues. Roman Grigorievich, yesterday, on Tuesday, the 1st of July, a military plane crashed in the Nizhny Novgorod region, a Russian one, of course. Preliminary reports indicate it was a Su-27 fighter jet. It crashed near the city of Kulebaki. Both pilots managed to eject. According to Baza News, one has been found, the other is still being searched for. As I understand, as of today, I haven't checked updates myself. But updated info says it was a Su-34 that crashed, the one that drops KABs. That's the bastard that drops KABs, wrote our Ukrainian military analyst. Moreover, Russia has already lost more than 30 Su-34 aircraft, and in total over 135 aircraft during the war against Ukraine, specifically, as I understand it, since the full-scale invasion, according to British intelligence. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Well, the Su-34 is the best version of the Su-27M. Why were they confused in the first place? That is, most likely, there were certain video footage of the plane crashing itself. It looks similar. Well, in general, the whole line of Russian Su aircraft is basically a continuation of the Su-27M. By the way, an excellent aircraft, the Su-27, Su-27M, both are outstanding machines. They Russians well. It's a Soviet design, a Soviet aircraft, and the Russians continued this line. The Su-30, Su-34S, Su-35S, they're all roughly of the same type. Basically, the Su-57 and Su-75 are practically the same as the Su-27M, just with certain upgrades to the engine and electronics. So the Su-34, you're right, that's really the nasty one. It's a frontline bomber aircraft that mainly drops glide bombs. The Su-34 can carry up to 6 glide bombs at once, or 12 FABs, which hang in clusters of 2 each. So basically, these are the same aerial bombs. It can lift 12,500 kilogram aerial bombs into the air on those same 6 pylons. If we're talking about the ones with wings, meaning with a guidance system, then they carry 6 of those and drop them on us. It's very important for us that these planes go down. It was most likely a training flight, and during the landing approach, one of the landing gear struts failed to deploy. The hydraulics failed, so the decision was made to divert the plane and have the pilots eject. They didn't want to land, they didn't want to, they probably didn't want to risk the lives of the flight crew. This means things aren't going so well for them with their flight personnel since they resolved the issue, this way diverting the plane and having the pilots eject. It seems that both are alive, although of course that still needs to be confirmed. And as for the plane itself, in principle, it can actually land with or without landing gear. It has that capability. I once had a cadet, I think it was my second graduating class. I had a cadet named Lebedevil, never forget, who bounced during landing, and with a heavy overload collapsed the front landing gear, broke the front strut, and basically rolled down the runway on the fuselage, on the nose. There were sparks flying, but it didn't catch fire. Basically, the cadet survived, and they even tried to teach him to fly again afterwards. The point is, the plane can, in principle, land even without the landing gear. But in this case, they didn't want to risk the flight crew's lives. So they abandoned the plane. What does this mean? What am I saying? It means that the Russians don't have that many pilots, not that many, if they decided to destroy the plane in this way. Well, for us, that's basically normal. You could say glory to the manufacturers of hydraulic oils who filled this plane with the wrong oil, at the very least. And knowing that the landing gear didn't deploy, that means the hydraulics failed in this case. Maybe it was some Kovalenko, Dmitrenko, or Borodenko who filled it with this oil. Maybe put in something wrong, maybe even poured in some donkey urine. And there you have a ton less Su-34.
Roman Grigorievich, unfortunately, moving on to negative news, to negative information. The United States has suspended the delivery of Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine. Among the weapons and ammunition whose deliveries to Ukraine have been suspended by the US are more than 100 Hellfire missiles, over 250 high-precision GMLRS rocket systems, dozens of Patriot interceptors, dozens of Stinger surface-to-air missiles, AIM air-to-air missiles, grenade launchers, and thousands of 155mm high-explosive howitzer shells. White House Representative Anna Kelly told the television channel that the decision was made to put U.S. interests first, NBC News reports, citing sources. And the White House has officially confirmed that they have suspended arms deliveries to Ukraine. Roman Grigorievich, could you please comment?
And how long have we been talking about this? About the fact that there is, well, it's obvious, disagreement between Putin and Trump is stitched together with white thread. So this so-called agreement or as Trump likes to call it, a deal. This deal is visible to us. And moreover, it's a direct deal. So Russia is not helping Iran. They abandoned Iran, meaning they stopped helping them. But in return, Trump is not helping Ukraine. And now, after the deal is already in its final stages, Russia is showing, Putin has shown his part of the deal. He has fulfilled it. And now he is demanding that Trump fulfill his part of the deal to stop helping Ukraine. Trump is fulfilling it. So you could say these two are pure genocidaires. Now, why? Because what did Trump stop? Trump mainly stopped air defense systems, meaning the protection of civilians from Russian attacks. And you could even say more, he invited Putin to continue his terrorism against the Ukrainian population, which is exactly what he's about to do. It's a good thing that we still have a certain amount, at least in storage, including emergency reserves. In other words, there are supplies, maybe even enough for half a year. And we have our partners who, I think over these 6 months, will find ways to compensate for this kind of Trump-style hold. So here, it's just Trump has shown his true face, at least. And we've seen it, but there's nothing new, so to speak. We've been talking about this for several months now, that this deal is a done deal. It's already been made. Now, of course, the only thing is another problem is going to come up. They will force us, not just force us, but present it as a great victory to hand over our territory to the Russians, to leave the Russian army on the occupied land. And this will be shown everywhere, blasted from every iron, as if it's a great victory. They stopped Putin, gave away 20% of our territory, left it under the Russians' boot. And this too is actually part of the Middle East deal.
Roman Grigorievich. CNN reports that, according to Ukrainian intelligence, North Korea will send up to 30,000 troops to support Russia. According to intelligence data reviewed by journalists, North Korea plans to send 30,000 soldiers in the coming months. In Ukraine, they believe that Russia is capable of providing the necessary equipment, weapons, and ammunition in order to further integrate them into Russian combat units. South Korean intelligence has reported that North Korea may send a new contingent to Russia this summer. So, as I understand it, that means now...
Well, this possibility definitely exists in theory, although in principle, it can't be ruled out in practice either. Well, what are 30,000? There's basically two divisions. Two divisions that right now the Koreans could deploy. I think they could replace those 50,000 Russians, say, on the Kursk front or the Kharkiv front. There are about 50,000 there as well. And these 30,000, and even more so, there are a few thousand more as well. They aren't actually participating in the fighting at the moment right now. The Koreans are mostly positioned on the second line. So in principle, an entire Korean group could, for example, take over one section of the front, the Kursk sector, to cover the Kursk region from our attacks. And those 50,000 Russians who are currently in the Kursk region could be redeployed as reinforcements for the second wave of the summer military campaign in 2025, mainly toward the Eastern Front, for example, near Pokrovsk or Kupiansk. In other words, to strengthen this, to reinforce this main Russian direction. That's most likely how it will be carried out, at least based on military logic.
Russian propagandists are publishing footage allegedly showing Russian troops capturing the first settlement in the Dnipropetrovsk region, Dakhnian raising their Aquafresh rug there. Ukrainian military claimed that the Russians did indeed manage to raise their tricolor, but they did not secure a foothold in the settlement. There are no official comments. Roman Grigorievich, what is the situation like there specifically?
Well, first of all, the thing is, the main objective for the Russians in this campaign is to expand their land corridors. This means seizing the left bank part of Zaporizhzhia region, the south, the southwest, the west of Donetsk region, and part of the Dnipropetrovsk region. This is all about expanding the land corridor. There is no strategic objective to capture the Dnipropetrovsk region there. That is simply not their goal. Why? Because at this point, they don't need it. Because they need to. Well, they're simply not keeping up with the timelines. They're just not making it on schedule. So somewhere they will definitely trample around in the Dnipropetrovsk region in Dakhne or say somewhere else. By the way, this is absolutely not a problem. For example, if you look at it from the perspective of a breakthrough of the front, or some new objective. Absolutely not. In other words, these are ongoing combat operations. And even in our information flow, there's no need to pay attention to this. The Russians are pushing our troops back mainly in the Zaporizhia and Donetsk regions in this direction. This is the Novoselki area. Roughly speaking, if you look at Huliaipol, Pokrovsk, these are a part of this area, is also the Dnipropetrovsk region. So for the Dnipropetrovsk region as a whole, this is absolutely not a problem at all. And there's no need to spread fear. Certain combat operations are taking place in this direction. This happened when IF's tactical group was replaced by one of the corps that was being deployed there. A correct strategic decision was made. But again, during the rotation, the Russians pushed back a few kilometers there. And if you look at it from the perspective of the administrative border, they're kind of lingering in the Dnipropetrovsk region, including on the Dnipropetrovsk territory. To say that they ran into Dakhne, then ran out of Dakhne, hung up their so-called Aquafresh flag, peed under a birch tree there, carved Vasya was here's. They can do whatever they want just to make it smell of Russian spirit somewhere, for example. And then they'll run around with this video and photo footage all over Russia, back and forth, telling everyone that they've supposedly captured the Dnipropetrovsk region somewhere. That's more or less how it's going to look right now in the information flow. Let me repeat once again, there are absolutely no problems in this direction, especially if the right decision is made to bring in law enforcement and strengthen the forces. Just like last year when the National Police and National Guard were reinforced, they deserve credit for that. It was precisely the involvement of the National Police and National Guard last year in the defense of Pokrovsk that at the very least stopped the expansion of the eastern flank of the Russian northern flank near Pokrovsk. So if a decision is made now, meaning actually deploying the armed forces of Ukraine, specifically the National Guard, the National Well, this refers to all the security forces, not just the National Police and National Guard, but several 100,000 security personnel in total, then we will absolutely hold this direction and even push back Russian troops in some positions. So there is absolutely nothing catastrophic about this. And since they're hanging around near the border, every day they'll be running, getting cut down and peeing under a birch tree. And every day we'll be saying we cleared them out from there and cut down the birch tree. That's more or less how it's going to be.
Roman Grigorievich, Macron spoke with Putin once again for the first time in a long while, if I'm not mistaken, since the beginning of 2022, since the full-scale invasion. But they did talk. He discussed the outcome of these talks with Zelensky. But the media have already published the results, saying that Putin stated there will be no ceasefire. He's not interested in it. He continues to terrorize our country. When Kellogg visited Lukashenko wrote publicly after the visit, I think that Kellogg would work on making sure Ukraine does not attack Russian territory. In general, it's just total madness. As a result, all military analysts report that Russia will use terror against the civilian population and peaceful cities throughout this summer and the entire autumn. And Budanov, responding to journalists' questions just yesterday, said that for Russia, using 400 to 500 drones every day is unrealistic. However, the Russians can occasionally launch up to 500 strike drones at once. This was reported by the head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense. This is a very important topic. Roman Grigorievich, let's discuss it.
Well, the first important topic, Macron has started addressing Ukraine-related issues with Putin. Obviously, the main issue was still the Iranian one. That is Iran's nuclear program, that's clear. So basically it fits into the overall picture, but the Ukrainian issue was also raised, and that's not good. Why is it not good? Whenever Putin finds a willing ear to lay out his demands regarding Ukraine in this case, it's Macron. Before that, for example, it was Trump. Before that, it was Erdogan or someone else, the Pope, the Mother Pope, and so on and so forth. As soon as Putin finds a willing ear to pour out his demands, he immediately starts killing hostages. He's a terrorist. So in the near future, expect some kind of attack purely terrorist in nature. He doesn't operate any other way. This has all been going on since 2022, since the grain deal. The first terrorist attack by the Russians, truly terrorist in terms of discussing any agreements, including the grain deal. It happened under Erdogan. He initiated it there. At that moment, Putin struck Vinnytsia, and it was precisely at that time. And now we see the exact same picture. Macron lent him a willing ear, and Macron was even smart enough to call the main terrorist and discuss us. Now he's going to start killing hostages. The methods are different. Missiles, Shahed drones, or rather a Jiran attack. There haven't been any Shaheds for a long time now. That needs to be clearly understood. Even the GUR has confirmed this, and Budanov said that there is nothing Shahed about the Russian Jirans except for the name. It's now a Chinese, Russian-Chinese production. Therefore, all the Shahed factories that were destroyed by the Israelis in Iran have absolutely no impact on the number of Jirans produced, since this is mainly Chinese, Russian production. So these Jirans are produced at a rate of about 150 to 200 units per day. In Izhevskan, by the way, there was a strike there and also in Labucha. And now a factory is already being built in North Korea. It's pretty much the same situation. In other words, they can produce 150 to 200 per day. So over several days, they can stockpile about 50 to 100 drones per day, and say once a week, they can amass them and create serious pressure on use up to 400 to 500 at a time. Why exactly this number? The thing is, there are issues with routing. In the last attack, if anyone watched the trackers showing the movement of these Jirans, you could see they were flying all over the plaza, literally just anywhere over 2,000 kilometers, so that our teams wouldn't intercept them. They were flying along different routes without any particular pattern or attachment, purely to terrorize. Well, first of all, to overload our air defense, and secondly, just to terrorize the local population, because in the end, all of it was falling on the heads of peaceful civilians. That's the kind of approach they used. But this attack was actually covering a missile strike. So it's not all that simple. I mean, they launched about 500 Jiran drones, but during that time, several dozen missiles under the cover of these randomly flying Jiran drones managed to reach our targets and accomplish certain combat objectives. And that's a big problem, in my opinion. If you put all this together, most likely Putin will prepare such large-scale attacks about once a week. Jiran drones flying wherever and missiles coming in to carry out combat missions. And that will be a full-scale terrorist package, so to speak. Honestly, the less Macron calls, the better it would be for us. Why? What are they discussing? Are they trying to persuade Putin to stop hostilities? Is it really beneficial and interesting for us to stop the fighting? It's not about Putin, it's about us. They're tying our hands, which means leaving the Russian army on our territory. And that's capitulation, pure and simple. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's what they're gonna try to push us toward now. Capitulation, but only on Putin's terms. Putin is not satisfied with just a land corridor. The width of the land corridor isn't enough for him. He wants to seize most of the Zaporizhia and most of the Donetsk regions and expand it to 150, even 120 kilometers. That's the minimum. For that, he needs to capture Orikhiv, take Huliaipol, Pokrovsk, and also Konstantinivka. So it's a whole set of targets, and of course, he's going to go after them, which means we need to resist. What kind of ceasefire are we talking about? What is this even about? It's not clear. They asking Putin to take part of our territory. Well, who would call them smart?
Dear audience, please like this video. We work for an audience all over the world so that people know the truth about Russian aggression and Russia's war against Ukraine. We are fighting against Russian propaganda, so every like, every comment, and every subscription is for a good cause to help as many people as possible around the world support Ukraine. The well-known military analyst Roman Sveta, we talk with Roman Grigorievich every Monday and Friday. Roman Grigorievich, thank you, and see you this Friday.
Goodbye.